The warning that shattered arrogance. The Valar Empire had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. In that time, they had conquered 473 worlds. They had enslaved 62 species. They had turned entire star systems into monuments of their supremacy, artificial rings of metal and stone that orbited dying suns, each one inscribed with the names of the conquered in a language designed to communicate only one concept: submission. The Empire knew no equals. They had never retreated. They had never negotiated. They had never, in 10 millennia of expansion, encountered a force that could stand against their military doctrine of absolute, overwhelming annihilation, until the day they found humanity. The Council of Conquest Emperor Vaxthor sat upon the throne of eternal victory, a seat carved from the compressed core of a neutron star, its surface still radiating the faint heat of gravitational collapse. Around him, holographic projections flickered to life, each one representing a member of his war council. The most decorated military minds in Valar history. "Speak," the Emperor commanded, his voice reverberating through the throne room like distant thunder. Fleet Admiral Krenth materialized first, his reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile among his kind. "My Emperor, our scout division has returned from the Outer Rim. They have discovered a new species." Another conquest? Vaxthor's interest was minimal. There were always new species. Most knelt within days. The stubborn ones lasted weeks. None lasted longer. They called themselves humans. Krenth gestured and a star map expanded between them. A small cluster of systems glowed at the galaxy's edge, isolated, seemingly insignificant. Preliminary scans indicate a population of approximately 8 billion across 12 colony worlds. Their technology appears adequate. Fusion drives, primitive energy shields, kinetic weapons. "Primitive," repeated War Counselor Thexval, her 4 eyes narrowing with disdain. "Then why bring this to the Emperor's attention? Send a subjugation fleet and be done with it." But Krenth hesitated, and that hesitation caught Vaxthor's attention. "What troubles you, Admiral?" "Their defensive posture, my Emperor. It's minimal, almost non-existent. Yet our scouts detected something unusual in their outer territories. Energy signatures we couldn't classify, spatial distortions that appeared and vanished before we could analyze them." Krenth's claws tapped against his holographic podium. "They seem aware of our presence, yet they've made no attempt to fortify, to negotiate, or to flee. Perhaps they're simply foolish," Thexval suggested. "Or perhaps they're weak and know it," another counselor added. "Some species freeze when facing extinction." Emperor Vaxthor considered this. In his long reign, he had learned that there were patterns to conquest. The aggressive species fought immediately. They were the most entertaining, but also the most predictable. The diplomatic ones bargained. They were tedious. The frightened ones scattered. They were hardly worth the effort of pursuit. But species that simply waited? That was unusual. Send the 7th Conquest Fleet, Vaxthor decided. 300 warships should be sufficient for such a minor acquisition. "Admiral Krenth, you will lead personally. I want these humans cataloged and processed within 1 rotation. If they possess anything of value, technology, resources, strategic position, claim it. If not, examples must still be made." Krenth bowed his head. "It shall be done, my Emperor." "The humans will kneel or burn." "See that they do both," Vaxthor replied. "I want the galaxy to remember that distance from our core worlds provides no safety. The Empire reaches everywhere." The approach 3 weeks later. The 7th Conquest Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of human territory. Admiral Krenth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Annihilator, watching the tactical displays populate with data. 300 Valar warships materialized in perfect formation around him, a wall of firepower that had shattered planetary defenses across dozens of star systems. Each vessel was a testament to Valar engineering. 2 kilometers of reinforced battle armor, plasma cannons capable of glassing continents, and shields that could withstand direct hits from stellar flares. The fleet represented enough destructive power to sterilize 50 planets. Scan results. "Tactical Officer Vren," Krenth ordered. "Detecting the human colony world, designated Epsilon 7 by our scouts," Vren reported, her mandibles clicking with concentration. "Population, approximately 600 million. Industrial centers detected, orbital infrastructure minimal. Defensive satellites." "Admiral, they have no defensive satellites." "None?" Krenth felt a stirring of disappointment. He had hoped for at least token resistance. Confirmed, Admiral. No orbital weapons platforms, no minefield networks, no atmospheric shields. They appear completely undefended. Laughter rippled across the bridge. Several junior officers exchanged glances that communicated the same thought. This will be over before lunch. Commence standard intimidation protocols, Krenth commanded. Broadcast on all frequencies. Let them hear the voice of the Empire. The communications array activated, beaming a message toward the human world with enough power to override every receiver on the planet. Attention, human colony. You have entered the domain of the Valar Empire. Your civilization is hereby claimed as property of Emperor Vaxthor, eternal ruler of the known galaxy. You will stand down all vessels, deactivate all weapons, and prepare for occupation. Resistance will result in total annihilation. You have 1 standard hour to comply. This is your only warning. Krenth settled back into his command throne, expecting the usual responses. Panicked transmissions, desperate pleas for mercy. Perhaps a few futile threats from whatever passed for military leadership among these humans. Instead, silence. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The human colony made no response whatsoever. Are they receiving us? Krenth asked. Affirmative, Admiral. Our signal is reaching every major population center. They can hear us. Then perhaps they don't understand. Sir? Vren interrupted, her voice suddenly tense. I'm detecting a single vessel launching from the colony. Small craft approximately 80 meters in length. It's approaching our position. 1 ship? Krenth leaned forward. Are its weapons active? Negative, Admiral. In fact, I'm reading no weapons systems at all. It appears to be unarmed. The bridge fell silent. Everyone stared at the tactical display as a single green blip separated from the planet and began a slow, steady approach toward 300 Valar warships. What kind of madness is this? Muttered Tactical Officer Vren. The human vessel maintained its course, making no aggressive maneuvers, showing no sign of fear or hesitation. It simply approached. Admiral, the communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from the human craft. Audio only. Shall I play it? Krenth gestured his approval. Curious despite himself, the voice that filled the bridge was female, calm, and carried an almost unsettling quality of serenity, like someone explaining a simple fact to a child. Valar Fleet. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Coordination. I am transmitting from an unarmed diplomatic vessel. I am here to deliver a message. A message? Krenth scoffed. Then speak, human. Beg for your world. Perhaps I'll allow some of you to live as servants. There was a pause, and when Chen spoke again, her tone hadn't changed. Still calm, still measured, but now with something else underneath. Something that made several bridge officers unconsciously step back from their stations. This is not a negotiation. This is not a plea. This is a warning. You dare? Krenth's claws scraped against his armrest. You face 300 warships with a single unarmed vessel and you issue warnings? Yes, Chen replied simply. Because you don't understand what you found here. You don't know who we are. You assume we are weak because we do not build vast fleets. You assume we are defenseless because we do not fortify our worlds. You assume we fear you because we do not threaten you. The human vessel had stopped moving now, hovering in space between the Valar fleet and the distant blue marble of the colony world. All of your assumptions are wrong. Krenth felt his patience evaporating. Human, your world has 1 hour to surrender. After that, you're not listening, Chen interrupted, and now there was something sharp in her voice. This is your only warning. Turn your fleet around. Leave human space. Never return. If you proceed, if you attack, if you fire a single weapon at any human world or vessel, you will not survive. Not most of you. Not some of you. None of you. Silence dominated the bridge. Several officers looked at their admiral, waiting for the order to vaporize this impudent human and her tiny ship. But Krenth found himself genuinely puzzled. This wasn't bravado. He'd heard plenty of that from doomed species trying to bluff their way to survival. This was something else. Chen spoke with the absolute certainty of someone stating an obvious fact, like informing someone that fire was hot or vacuum was lethal. You threaten the 7th Conquest Fleet, Krenth said slowly, with 1 unarmed vessel. I'm not threatening you, Admiral Krenth. The fact that she knew his name made several officers tense. I'm warning you. There's a difference. A threat implies I want something from you. Compliance, surrender, tribute. I want nothing from you except your absence. What happens if you attack isn't a threat. It's a certainty. It's physics. It's math. It's as inevitable as a star's collapse. I'm simply trying to help you avoid it. How merciful, Krenth replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Tell me, Commander Chen, what terrifying weapon do you possess that could possibly threaten this fleet? The pause that followed felt longer than it was. We possess no weapon, Admiral. We possess understanding, and that makes us the most dangerous thing you've ever encountered. Krenth had heard enough. Tactical lock weapons on the human vessel. Let's end this farce. Sir, weapons locked. Commander Chen, Krenth announced. Your warning is rejected. I'll give you one chance to retreat. Return to your world and tell them to prepare for occupation. This is the mercy the Empire offers. I tried, Chen said softly, and there was something in her voice that sounded like genuine regret. I really did try. Remember that, Admiral. In the moments that follow, remember that you were warned. Remember that you chose this. Fire, Krenth commanded. But before the weapons officer could execute the order, something happened. The human vessel's engines shut down completely. All its systems went dark. It simply hung in space, apparently dead, apparently surrendering. Admiral, Vren reported, confused. The human ship has powered down entirely. They've given up? Perhaps they realize the futility, Krenth mused. No matter. Destroy it anyway. Let it be a message. Admiral, wait. Vren's voice was sharp with alarm. I'm detecting energy readings from the human vessel. But that's impossible. All its systems are offline. On every screen, every tactical display, every sensor readout across the entire Valar fleet, the readings began to spike. Not from the human ship's engines or reactors, those were still dark. The energy was coming from somewhere else, or everywhere else. What is that? Krenth demanded, rising from his throne. Sir, I can't. Vren's hands moved frantically across her console. Space itself is registering abnormal readings. Gravitational fluctuations, quantum-level distortions. It's like reality is. The human vessel's hull began to glow, not with heat or energy, but with something that sensors couldn't classify. The light wasn't reflecting off its surface. It was emanating from within the very structure of space-time around it. Commander Chen's voice returned, but now it wasn't coming from the ship's transmitters. It was everywhere, in the bridge, in every corridor, in every vessel of the fleet simultaneously, as if the words were being written directly into the fabric of existence itself. You were warned. And then, between one heartbeat and the next, the 7th Conquest fleet ceased to exist. Not destroyed. Not scattered. Not damaged. Simply gone. 300 warships containing 75,000 Valar warriors vanished from reality as if they had never been there at all. No explosion. No debris field. No energy signature indicating weapons fire. The sensors that had been tracking them showed empty space. The quantum echoes that every object leaves in its wake, gone. Even the gravitational distortions that large masses create had smoothed away to nothing, all except one ship. The Crimson Annihilator hung alone in the void, its engines dead, its weapons offline, its shields collapsed. Admiral Krenth stood on the bridge, his claws frozen in a gesture of command that had never completed. Around him, his crew remained perfectly still, as if time itself had paused. Only Krenth could move. Only Krenth could see. A new display materialized in front of him, not on his screens but in the air itself, as if projected from nowhere. It showed footage from dozens of angles, his fleet in perfect formation, weapons charging, preparing to fire. And then, in the span of a single frame, they were simply absent from the recording. The display shifted, showing internal camera feeds from other vessels. Crew members at their stations, confident, some even smiling, anticipating an easy victory. And then, nothing. Not death, not violence. Just empty rooms, empty corridors, empty ships hanging in space for a microsecond before they too vanished. Commander Chen's voice, kind and patient, spoke one last time. Go home, Admiral Krenth. Tell your Emperor what you saw here. Tell him that humanity offered peace and you chose war. Tell him that we erased 300 warships from existence without firing a weapon, without raising shields, without even trying. Tell him that this is what happens when you ignore a warning. And tell him this. If the Valar Empire ever approaches human space again, It won't be your fleets that disappear. It will be your empire, your worlds, your history. We will reach back through time itself and unmake you from the moment your species first looked up at the stars and dreamed of conquest. Do you understand, Admiral? You're alive right now because I chose mercy. Your crew is gone because your emperor chose pride. Don't make his mistake again. The bridge systems flickered back to life. Krenth's crew gasped, suddenly released from their temporal prison, unaware that they'd been frozen at all. Admiral? Friend called out, her voice shaking.
Sir, where's the fleet?
Where did everyone go? Admiral Krenth stood alone on his bridge, staring at the empty space where 300 warships had been moments before. In the distance, the human colony world continued its peaceful rotation, unchanged, unbothered, completely unharmed, and that single human vessel, still dark, still silent, began drifting away toward home. Set course for the Valar homeworld, Krenth whispered, his voice hollow. Maximum speed, sir? What about the conquest?
What about why now?
Krenth roared, and for the first time in his military career, there was something in his voice that his crew had never heard before. Fear. When the Emperor refused to listen. The return of the damned, the Crimson Annihilator limped into Valar space 3 weeks later, its hull scarred not by weapons fire, but by the strain of pushing its engines beyond safety limits. Admiral Krenth had not slept since the encounter. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same thing. Empty space where his fleet had been, and the terrible understanding that 300 warships hadn't been destroyed. They had been edited out of existence. The homeworld of Valar Prime loomed ahead, a massive planet wrapped in rings of orbital industry and military installations. Normally, returning fleets were greeted with ceremonies, victory parades, holographic broadcasts celebrating another successful conquest. The Crimson Annihilator received no such welcome. Instead, it was immediately surrounded by security vessels and escorted, under guard, like a prisoner, directly to the Imperial Palace's private docking bay. Krenth understood. A fleet admiral who departed with 300 warships and returned with only his flagship was either a traitor or a coward. The Empire had no patience for either. Within hours, he stood before the throne of eternal victory once more. The throne room had been transformed into a tribunal. Every member of the War Council was present, along with representatives from the Intelligence Division, the Imperial Guard, and the Order of Historical Accuracy, the Empire's official record keepers, who ensured that history reflected the Emperor's glory. Emperor Vaxthor sat in terrible silence, his 4 eyes fixed on Krenth with an intensity that had made lesser beings collapse from fear alone. "Speak," the Emperor commanded. "Explain to me how you departed with the 7th Conquest Fleet and returned alone. Explain to me how 300 warships, 75,000 of my finest warriors simply vanished. Explain to me why I should not execute you where you stand for this catastrophic failure." Krenth had prepared for this moment during the long journey home. He had rehearsed his words, considered every angle, anticipated every question. But now, standing before the assembled might of the Empire's leadership, he realized that no amount of preparation could make what he had to say sound believable. "My Emperor," he began, his voice steady despite the trembling in his limbs. "The fleet did not fail in battle. The fleet did not retreat. The fleet ceased to exist." Murmurs rippled through the assembled council members. War Counselor Thexval's laugh was sharp and mocking. "Ceased to exist?" she repeated. "What poetic nonsense is this? Ships don't simply vanish, Admiral. They're destroyed, captured, or they flee. Which was it?" "None of those, Counselor." Krenth activated his personal data core, projecting the recorded sensor logs into the center of the room. "I brought evidence. Everything our systems captured in those final moments." The holographic display showed the fleet in formation, the small human vessel approaching, the exchange of communications. The council members watched in silence as Commander Chen delivered her warning. Several officers chuckled at the human's audacity. Emperor Vaxthor's expression remained unreadable. Then came the moment, the human ship powering down, the energy reading spiking from nowhere. And then, the collective gasp from the council was the first genuine reaction Krenth had heard. On the display, 300 warships existed one moment and were simply absent the next. No transition, no process, just binary existence, there then not there. "Impossible," someone whispered. "A sensor malfunction." another suggested. I reviewed the log 17 times, Krenth said quietly. I had our technicians verify every system. I cross-referenced data from secondary sensors, backup arrays, even the navigation computers. The readings are consistent across all platforms. The fleet was there. Then it wasn't. Then they were destroyed, Thexval insisted. Some weapon we didn't detect moving faster than our sensors could track. There was no debris field, Counselor. When a ship is destroyed, matter doesn't disappear. It transforms. Energy, heat, radiation, physical fragments, something remains. Space itself retains evidence of violence. There was nothing. Not a single atom out of place except for the absence of our vessels. The Emperor rose from his throne, descending the steps toward the holographic display. He watched the replay again, his eyes narrowing at the moment of disappearance. This human, Vaxthor said slowly. Commander Chen, she warned you this would happen. Yes, my Emperor. And you believed she was bluffing? I believed. Krenth chose his words carefully. I believed that no species we had encountered possessed technology capable of such an act. I believed our intelligence reports that indicated humanity was technologically inferior. I believed that 300 warships represented overwhelming superiority. You believed wrong. The Emperor's voice was cold. Your belief cost me a fleet. My Emperor, Silence. Vaxthor turned to face his war council. What is your assessment? Is this a new weapon? A technology we must acquire? Intelligence Director Kelthrak stepped forward, his cybernetic enhancements whirring softly. My Emperor, we've analyzed the data Admiral Krenth provided. The energy signatures preceding the fleet's disappearance don't match any known weapon system. In fact, they don't match any known physics. The readings suggest manipulation of fundamental forces, gravity, time, quantum probability fields. Meaning? Meaning that if these readings are accurate, the humans didn't destroy the fleet. They unmade it. They reached into the causal chain of events and removed the fleet from reality at a quantum level. The throne room erupted in heated discussion. Several council members declared it impossible. Others demanded verification. A few, the ones who had survived long enough to develop wisdom, fell silent and thoughtful. Emperor Vaxthor raised a hand, and silence returned immediately. I have ruled for 600 years, he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. In that time, I have seen technological marvels, encountered species with abilities we initially thought magical, witnessed weapons that bent the laws of nature. But always we adapted. We learned. We conquered. He turned to face Krenth directly. You failed, Admiral, but your failure has provided valuable intelligence. These humans possess technology beyond our current understanding. Therefore, we must acquire it. Kelthrax, what are the humans' total military capabilities? The intelligence director's expression was troubled. That's problematic, my Emperor. We have almost no intelligence on humanity beyond the peripheral scans. Every probe we've sent into their territory has disappeared. Every long-range observation satellite goes dark. Every intelligence operative we've tried to insert vanishes without a trace. It's as if their entire civilization is wrapped in a blind spot. Then we proceed with overwhelming force, Thexval declared. The 7th Fleet may have failed due to the element of surprise, but if we mobilize the full Imperial Armada— No, Krenth interrupted, then flinched as every eye turned to him. My Emperor, I respectfully submit that engaging humanity with conventional military force is inadvisable. Inadvisable? Vaxthor's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You suggest the Empire retreat? That we allow this insult to stand unanswered? I suggest we don't understand what we're facing, Krenth said desperately. Commander Chen's warning. She spoke with absolute certainty. Not bravado, not hope, certainty. As if she knew exactly what would happen if we attacked. As if humanity has done this before. Then they're a threat that must be eliminated, the Emperor declared. I will not have my empire live in fear of some hidden species lurking at the galaxy's edge, striking down fleets with impossible weapons. If they can erase 300 ships, what's to stop them from erasing worlds? Entire star systems? The Imperial throne itself? He turned to his war council, his decision already made. Mobilize the full Imperial Armada. Every warship, every carrier, every dreadnought from every fleet across the Empire. Conscript vessels from our vassal states. I want overwhelming, absolute, undeniable superiority of force. My Emperor, Fleet Coordinator Vencross stepped forward. The full armada represents our entire military strength. 5,000 Imperial warships plus another 2,500 from our subject species. If we deploy everything, then we deploy everything, Vaxthor interrupted. I will personally command this fleet. The humans will see the full might of the Empire arrayed against them, and they will understand that their tricks and warnings mean nothing against true power. And if they do to the Armada what they did to the 7th Fleet? Krenth asked quietly. The Emperor's gaze could have melted steel. Then we die with honor rather than live with fear. But I believe these humans are bluffing, Admiral. I believe they had one weapon, one trick, and they used it against your fleet. I believe that when they see 7,500 warships approaching their territory, they will surrender or be annihilated. The Armada will assemble within one rotation. We depart in 3. Admiral Krenth, you will accompany us as an observer. If your failure led us into this situation, you will be present when we correct it. Krenth bowed his head, knowing argument was futile. As you command, my Emperor. As the Council dispersed to begin preparations for the largest military mobilization in Valar history, Krenth remained behind, staring at the frozen holographic image of Commander Chen's ship drifting in space. You were warned. Her voice echoed in his memory, and somewhere deep in his warrior's instinct, Krenth knew, absolutely knew, that the Emperor was making a terrible mistake. The gathering of the Armada, 3 months later, the largest military fleet ever assembled in galactic history, hung in formation at the edge of human space. 7,500 warships, representing dozens of species, hundreds of worlds, and the combined military might of an empire that had never known defeat. The formation stretched across light seconds of space, a wall of metal and firepower that could reduce entire planets to molten slag. At the center of this impossibility, aboard the massive Imperial flagship Eternal Dominion, Emperor Vaxthor surveyed his forces with satisfaction. Status report, he commanded. All vessels in position, my Emperor. Fleet Coordinator Vencross reported. Weapons charged. Shields at maximum. Every ship is networked into the central command matrix. Any attack will be met with coordinated, overwhelming retaliation. And the humans? Silent, my Emperor. Our scans detect their colonies, their infrastructure, their population centers, all operating normally. They've made no attempt to fortify, no attempt to evacuate, no attempt to mobilize any defense fleet we can detect. Because they have no defense, Thexval said confidently. She stood at the Emperor's right hand, vindicated in her belief that humanity's previous victory had been a trick, not genuine superiority. They used their weapon on the 7th Fleet and likely exhausted whatever power source it required. Now they wait, hoping we'll be intimidated by the memory. Admiral Krenth, standing silently in the shadows of the command deck, said nothing, but his eyes remained fixed on the long-range sensors, watching the human colonies for any sign of reaction. There was none. Broadcast our terms, Vaxthor ordered. The message transmitted across all frequencies, powerful enough to reach every human settlement simultaneously. Attention, human species. This is Emperor Vaxthor of the Valar Empire. You destroyed one of my fleets. That act of aggression cannot stand unanswered. You now face the full might of the Imperial Armada, 7,500 warships representing the combined power of 473 conquered worlds. You have one option: immediate, unconditional surrender. Reveal the technology you used to destroy the 7th Fleet. Submit to Imperial authority. If you comply, your species will be absorbed into the Empire with minimal casualties. If you resist, every human world will be sterilized. Every human station will be destroyed. Your species will be eradicated from history. You have 1 standard hour to respond. Choose wisely. The message ended. The Armada waited. 60 minutes of silence followed. No response, my Emperor, Communications Officer Ralthex reported. Not a single transmission from any human colony. Perhaps they're paralyzed with fear, Thexval suggested, waiting to see if we're bluffing. Then we demonstrate that we don't bluff, Vaxthor decided. Target the outermost human colony, the one designated Theta 9, minimal population, only 80 million inhabitants. Destroy it. Let the other colonies see what awaits them if they don't surrender. My Emperor, Krenth began, but Vaxthor silenced him with a gesture. You had your chance, Admiral. Now watch how true commanders handle resistance. Fleet Coordinator Vencross input the targeting commands. 300 ships on the Armada's forward edge adjusted their formation, weapons locking onto the distant human world. Firing solution confirmed. On your command, my Emperor. Vaxthor raised his hand. Fire. 300 plasma cannons powerful enough to crack tectonic plates discharged simultaneously. The beams of concentrated energy lanced through space toward the defenseless human colony, and then space itself opened. There was no other way to describe it. Reality folded, twisted, and suddenly between the Imperial Armada and the human colonies where there had been empty void, thousands of vessels materialized. But these were not ships in any conventional sense. They were impossibilities made manifest. Each one was midnight black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, their shapes defying geometric logic, appearing different from every angle, existing in more dimensions than the Valar sensors could process. They didn't arrive through hyperspace or wormholes or any detectable form of FTL travel. They simply weren't there, and then they were, as if they had always been there and the universe was just now remembering their presence. Evasive maneuvers, Venkros shouted. Shields to maximum. All weapons. The 300 plasma beams that had been fired at the human colony struck the newly appeared vessels and passed through them, not deflected, not absorbed. The weapons simply phased through the black ships as if they were ghosts, continuing onward into empty space where they dissipated harmlessly, light years from any target. What? Thexval's voice failed her. What are those things? Krenth stepped forward, his expression a mixture of vindication and horror. Those are human warships, Counselor. Or at least that's what I think they are, but I don't believe they exist in the same dimensional space as we do. Impossible, Vaxthor roared. Nothing can exist outside conventional space-time. Tell that to the humans, my Emperor, Krenth replied quietly. The black vessels began to move, except move was the wrong word. They seemed to flicker between positions, existing in one location and then another without traversing the space between. Several Valar warships found themselves suddenly surrounded by the black ships, which had somehow repositioned themselves from light seconds away to directly alongside Imperial vessels in the span of a heartbeat. They're everywhere, a panicked voice screamed across the command network. How are they moving so fast? They're not moving fast, Krenth said, his tactical mind finally grasping what he was seeing. They're moving through time. They're not traveling through space to reach those positions. They're simply choosing different moments when they're already there. Admiral, Venkros called out, his voice shaking. I'm receiving casualty reports from the forward divisions. They're imploding. No weapons fire, no energy signatures, but hulls are collapsing inward as if crushed by impossible gravitational forces. No, wait, he frantically worked his console. The reports are contradictory. Some ships report being torn apart by gravitational shear. Others report their atoms simply dispersing, losing molecular cohesion. One captain is screaming that his ship exists in multiple locations simultaneously, and he can see through himself. The main view screen showed the forward edge of the Armada. Imperial warships were dying, but not in any way that made sense. Some vessels simply crumpled, folding in on themselves in defiance of their structural integrity. Others seemed to blur, their solid forms becoming translucent, then transparent, then absent. A few began rotating through impossible angles, their three-dimensional forms trying to express motion through dimensions that shouldn't exist. None of the black human vessels had fired a single weapon. Return fire, Vaxthor commanded. Concentrate all weapons on those black ships. Destroy them! 7,000 warships opened fire simultaneously. The void between the two fleets lit up with enough firepower to vaporize a star. Plasma beams, kinetic projectiles, fusion warheads, antimatter torpedoes, the Empire's full arsenal unleashed in a display of destruction that would have terrified any conventional fleet. The human vessels flickered, not evaded, flickered. They phased out of existence for microseconds, just long enough for every weapon to pass through the space where they had been, and then phased back in completely untouched. They're not in our timeline, Krenth realized, speaking mostly to himself. They exist a few microseconds ahead or behind us. They can see our weapons coming and simply choose not to exist at that precise moment. We can't hit them because by the time our weapons reach where they are, they've already moved to when they aren't. Then how do we fight them? Thexval demanded, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. We don't, Krenth said simply. That's what Commander Chen was trying to tell us. That's what her warning meant. You can't fight an enemy that operates outside the rules of causality itself. Emperor Vaxthor stared at the tactical display as his armada, the largest military fleet ever assembled, the combined might of an empire 10,000 years old, died without landing a single effective shot against the enemy. And then, all at once, every weapon on both sides fell silent. The Imperial warships found their weapons locked, their shields frozen, their engines unresponsive. The human vessels stopped their impossible movements and hung in space, perfectly still, as if the entire battlefield had been paused by some cosmic hand. A new vessel appeared. This one was different from the black warships. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of the Emperor's flagship, and it didn't look like a weapon of war. Its design was elegant, almost artistic, with flowing lines and surfaces that seemed to shimmer with colors that had no names in any Valar language. It radiated an aura of terrible age, as if it had been traveling the stars since before the Empire's ancestors had discovered fire. And from this ancient vessel, a hologram materialized. Not on the view screens. Not transmitted through conventional communications. She appeared as a physical presence on every bridge and every corridor, in every vessel of the Imperial Armada simultaneously. A human woman with silver hair and eyes that held the weight of eons. "I am Admiral Elizabeth Constantine," she said, and her voice carried no anger, no triumph, no emotion at all. Just the flat certainty of someone stating absolute facts. Humanity's first fleet commander. "I believe it's time we had a conversation about who we really are." Emperor Vaxthor found his voice. I dare everything," Constantine interrupted calmly. "Because there is nothing in this galaxy I fear."
Do you know why?
Because humanity is not what you think we are. We are not newcomers to the stars. We are not primitive. We are not weak. She gestured, and the space around the Armada transformed. Visions appeared, not holograms, but something more real, as if windows were opening into true history. "We are the first children," Constantine continued. "The first species in this galaxy to achieve sentience. The first to reach the stars. The first to unlock the fundamental codes of reality itself. While your ancestors were still aquatic creatures hiding in tidal pools, my people were building megastructures that could harness the power of quasars. The visions showed impossible cities on planets that no longer existed, engineering projects on scales that defied comprehension, artificial stars, manufactured galaxies, and technology that treated the laws of physics like suggestions rather than rules. We seeded the cosmos," Constantine said. "We guided evolution on 1,000 worlds. We watched a species like yours emerged, developed, reached for the sky. We were the shepherds of the galaxy, the silent guardians who ensured that life, in all its forms, could flourish." "Lies," Vaxthor hissed, but his voice lacked conviction. "We had a choice to make," Constantine continued, ignoring the interruption. "We could rule. We could conquer. We could enforce our will across the galaxy and make every species kneel before human supremacy. Some of us wanted exactly that, but in the end we chose differently. We chose to step back, to watch, to let younger species find their own paths, make their own mistakes, achieve their own greatness. We withdrew to the edges of the galaxy, to places like this, and we waited. We hoped that the species we had helped nurture would grow into wisdom, would learn cooperation instead of conquest, would become something better than we had been in our youth." The visions shifted, showing wars, extinctions, species destroying themselves or being destroyed by others. But we were wrong. Or perhaps we were right, but too patient. We've watched for 10,000 years as your empire has spread across the galaxy like a plague, crushing every world that dared to exist independently. We've watched you enslave, eradicate, and terrorize hundreds of species, and we've done nothing, because we believed in allowing free will even when it led to atrocity. Constantine's eyes hardened. "But now you've made a mistake. You've approached our worlds. You've threatened our people, and while we chose patience over intervention, we never chose to be victims. The technology you've witnessed isn't advanced," she said. "It's fundamental. We don't use weapons that work within physics, we use tools that rewrite physics. We don't build ships that travel through space. We build vessels that edit their position in the quantum probability field. We don't destroy enemies, we simply choose timelines where they never existed." She raised her hand, and in the distance, a star system, Uninhabited according to the sensors, simply ceased to be. Not exploded, not collapsed. One moment 5 planets orbited a yellow sun. The next moment empty space stretched where the system had been, as if it had never existed at all. That, Constantine said quietly, was a demonstration. Those worlds were uninhabited, but they were real. They had existed for 3 billion years. Now they exist in no timeline, in no history, in no possible reality. We didn't destroy them. We reached back to the moment of their formation and simply chose otherwise. The throne room of the Eternal Dominion had gone absolutely silent. Emperor Vaxthor sat frozen on his command throne, his 4 eyes fixed on the human admiral with an expression that had never crossed his face before. Terror. You have a choice, Emperor, Constantine said. 2 paths lie before you, and the future of your species depends on which you choose right now in this moment. Path 1. You retreat. You take your armada back to your worlds. You order an immediate cessation of all hostile activities. You begin the process of releasing your subject species and transforming your empire from a machine of conquest into something that contributes to the galaxy instead of feeding on it. If you choose this path, humanity will remain in the shadows. We will continue to watch. We will remain ready, but we will not interfere further. Path 2. Her expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in every ship seemed to drop. Path 2, you refuse. You continue your aggression. You believe that somehow, some way, you can overcome us through force or cunning or determination. If you choose Path 2, the Valar Empire will end. Not conquered, not destroyed, erased. We will reach back through your history and unmake every moment that led to your species' rise. We will edit you out of the timeline itself, not just your empire, your entire evolutionary lineage. The Valar will become a species that never was, never could be, never might be in any possible iteration of reality. And before you think that's a bluff, Constantine added, consider this. Your 7th Fleet doesn't exist in any database anywhere in the galaxy except in Admiral Krenth's memories and the recordings aboard his ship. Check your historical records. Check your personnel files. Check your shipyard logs. You'll find no evidence that those ships were ever built, that those crews were ever born, that the 7th Fleet ever existed. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Intelligence Director Kelthrax frantically accessed the Imperial databases. His expression went from confusion to disbelief to horror. My Emperor, he whispered, she's right. There's no record of the 7th Fleet in any Imperial archive. According to every database we have, Admiral Krenth's ship was operating as a lone explorer vessel. The 300 warships, the 75,000 crew, there's no evidence they ever existed. We left Admiral Krenth's memories intact as a courtesy, Constantine said, as proof of what we could do, but we removed everything else. We retroactively edited your reality so that his fleet was never built. That's not a weapon, Emperor. That's what we consider a warning shot. She leaned forward and her presence seemed to fill every space and every ship simultaneously. So choose. Retreat and reform or continue and cease to exist. But choose now. Because my patience, humanity's patience, is measured in epochs and we've already spent 10,000 years watching your species cause suffering. I will give you 1 minute to decide. Silence fell. Emperor Vaxthor stared at the hologram, then at his war council. Thexval, who had been so confident in the Empire's superiority, refused to meet his eyes. The other counselors looked anywhere but at their emperor, unable to offer advice in a situation so far beyond their understanding. Only Admiral Krenth spoke, his voice steady. My Emperor, I've seen what they can do. I've felt what it's like to be the only survivor of a fleet that was erased from history. They're not bluffing. They're being merciful by giving us a choice at all. 30 seconds passed. Emperor Vaxthor, who had ruled for 600 years, who had never known defeat, who had built an empire on the foundation of absolute conquest and absolute authority, closed his 4 eyes. When he opened them again, something had changed in his expression. The arrogance was gone. The certainty was gone. In its place was something no Valar had ever seen in their emperor before. Humility. We withdraw, he said quietly. The Armada will return to Imperial space. We will consider your terms. Wise choice, Constantine said, and for the first time something like approval entered her voice. We'll be watching, Emperor. If you truly change, If your empire transforms into something that builds instead of destroys, humanity will leave you in peace. But if you ever threaten another species the way you threatened us, if you ever raise a weapon against the helpless again, we won't give a warning next time. We'll simply choose a reality where the Valar Empire never existed. Do you understand? Yes, Vaxthor whispered. We understand. Good. Constantine's hologram began to fade. Then go home. Become better. Or become nothing. The choice, as always, has been yours. She vanished. The black human warships flickered and were gone, as if they had never been there at all. The ancient vessel that had carried Constantine faded from sensors, leaving the Imperial Armada alone in empty space, their weapons still locked, their shields still frozen, completely at the mercy of an enemy that had chosen mercy. One by one, control of the Imperial ships was returned to them, and one by one, 7,500 warships, the largest military fleet ever assembled, turned away from human space and began the long journey home. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Emperor Vaxthor sat in silence, staring at the space where the human vessels had been. She called us first children, he said finally. If they're the first, what does that make us? Lucky, Admiral Krenth replied quietly. It makes us lucky that they're merciful. Epilogue 10 years later. Valar Federation, formerly the Valar Empire, gathered for its annual assembly on the homeworld of Valar Prime. Representatives from 473 worlds, now free and independent members rather than conquered subjects, debated policy and trade agreements in chambers that had once echoed with commands of conquest. Emperor Vaxthor, now simply President Vaxthor, sat among them as an equal voice rather than an absolute authority. The transformation had been difficult. Many in the old guard had resisted. Some had attempted coups. A few colonies had tried to continue the old ways of aggressive expansion. Those colonies had vanished overnight. Their populations relocated to new worlds by unknown forces. The aggressive leadership simply gone, erased, many suspected, by the silent guardians humanity had promised to be. But most had adapted. Most had learned. And slowly, painfully, the Valar species was becoming something new. Across the galaxy, other aggressive species had quietly disappeared. Raiders, slavers, genocidal regimes, all gone, often without warning, always without explanation. The galaxy's peaceful species began to whisper about the shadows, about the silent guardians, about the ancient ones who watched from the edges of space and punished those who preyed on the weak. Most species didn't know the guardians were human. But they knew someone was watching, and they knew to be better. On a human observation station at the galaxy's edge, Commander Sarah Chen, now Admiral Chen, though she rarely used the title, stood before a holographic display showing a young species, called the Tal'Viri, taking their first hesitant steps into interstellar space, their building generation. Ships, she noted to her second-in-command. Slow, cautious, but determined. No weapons on their vessels. No plans for conquest, just exploration and hope. Maybe this one will be different, her companion suggested. Chen smiled, remembering the words she'd spoken to Admiral Krenth a decade earlier. Maybe. We've been waiting a long time. Perhaps the galaxy is finally learning. She turned away from the display, walking toward the station's observation deck where she could see the stars spinning in their eternal dance. And if they don't learn? Her second asked. Chen's smile didn't waver, but her eyes held the weight of civilizations. Then we'll keep teaching. For as long as it takes, until every species in this galaxy understands that the strong exist to protect the weak. Not prey upon them. That's what guardians do. She stood in silence, watching the young Tal'Viri ships venture into the unknown, and whispered a prayer as old as humanity itself. May you find wonder out there. May you find friends. May you become better than we were at your age. And may you never, ever give us a reason to intervene. Behind her, invisible to all sensors, impossible to detect by any conventional means, 3,000 human warships maintained their eternal vigil. Patient, watchful, and ready. Humanity had withdrawn from the galaxy not because they were weak, but because they were strong enough to choose restraint. But restraint was not the same as helplessness, and the galaxy would remember that lesson for generations to come. The end.